What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Mets'd podcast. And today, we're coming to you guys with a special guest, Deesha Thosar from Fox Sports, formerly from the Mets beat. Going to talk about some offseason, going to talk about some winter meetings, going to talk about the Mets, going to talk about the Yankees, going to talk about a lot of stuff. But first, Deesha, what's going on? Thank you for coming on with us today.
What's up? Of course. Thanks for having me on.
Totally. So winter meetings are coming up next week. You're going to be there. What's the vibe right now around all of Major League Baseball for the winter meetings? Because we're super just focused, dialed in, locked in on Juan Soto here in the Mets world. But is there anything else going on to winter meetings besides Juan Soto that has anybody thinking at all?
Yeah, well, up until today, the golden at bat rule, I would have said it was just Juan Soto, but now I'm definitely curious to get people's opinions, especially executives and players, of how they feel about this. But in terms of free agency, it's definitely all about Juan Soto. I like that the dates came out sort of leading up to the winter meetings. That's different from at least last year with Shohei Ohtani. It was kind of, we didn't know when he would sign. Already, we have an idea that Soto's kind of getting down to the wire now. They said reports have been the first week of December, second week of December. Of course, that lines up right with the winter meeting. So hopefully it should be really the Soto sweepstakes really getting even kicked up a notch would be really exciting, I think.
I know they mentioned that Juan Soto, I think, is going to be at the winter meetings himself. Is that something typical of a big player like that during free agency? Is that more so like him almost hinting that maybe a press conference could be coming during that time for a signing?
Yeah, it was kind of, my thought was the second one, that already we have so many clues that it's really coming down to the wire, that might as well really roll him out with the team that he signs with right then and there. I have seen it in the past where players are already visiting teams where the winter meetings location is that venue. Of course, this case it's Dallas, so I'm not expecting really Soto to go to the Texas Rangers. But yeah, it really is a little bit uncommon. But in that same way, if he's going to be there at all, then just get the whole pomp and circumstances going and get him to sign and present with the press conference right there makes the most sense to me.
What could that dynamic be like with a couple teams, especially teams that probably don't like each other that much, between the Mets, Yankees, and Red Sox, all within the same floor or combination of floors and conference rooms in the same hotel building, where they all know that they're kind of exchanging times, meeting with Juan Soto, exchanging their final offers?
Yeah, well, it's definitely great for Scott Boras and Juan Soto for all of these executives to be under the same roof. But at least in my experience, I mean, these teams and executives really stick to their own groups, their own people. They'll just kind of be suites in the hotel where they have their own situation room, so to speak, lined up. And those are the meeting points. Whereas, of course, there are offers going around around the building. So that just kind of makes it convenient, logically speaking. So not as much as, oh, well, David Stearns is not really going to have a face to face with Hal Steinbrenner and kind of duke it out. That's not what's how I wish it was that exciting. I
Kind
think
of fun.
everyone would love that. Yeah, it would be great. But more so, it's just convenient, I think, to have everybody under one roof. But they definitely, with Juan Soto, the stakes are high, and that's what I like about this, with the two New York teams going up against each other this way. It's, I think, the first big star where they're going to duke it out like this. I don't think it's going to be the last, of course.
Yeah, James obviously at the beginning said that, used to be Mets beat. You've covered Mets, Yankees, Major League Baseball just in general now. What do you think it would do for the Mets Yankees dynamic if Soto were to pick the Mets over the Yankees?
Oh, I mean, completely different. I don't think we've seen anything like it already. Going back to when the Dodgers beat the Yankees in the World Series, and then Dodgers players on record publicly embarrassing the Yankees in that way is just kind of stunning. That's what reporters, those are the questions we ask players. What did you think? How easy was it to beat them? And most players are like, I'm going to be respectful, not even go there. The Dodgers are like sitting around a campfire, really going after it. So in that way, the Yankees are already, right, being made fun of in the industry. That's different. They're the evil empire Yankees. Now, if Soto goes to the Mets, and it is by some sort of deal that the Yankees could have accomplished, if really just up the ante 50 million or 100 million, something in the range that wouldn't be outrageous without Steve Cohen completely blowing the lid off. I think that would really, really change the dynamic in New York in terms of who is the top dog. What did the Mets do to convince Soto to go to the Mets over Yankees, a franchise obviously that not only did he just play for, but is beloved in history. So I think, again, I don't know if that will happen, but if it does, I think we don't even know really what the other side of that will look like if and until it does happen.
Being based in New York and spending a lot of time with both of these teams this season, did you feel any kind of divergence in vibe or any kind of weird thing happening between their playoff runs, between the regular season, now going to the offseason with like the Yankees kind of have this prize where they can wash away a lot of embarrassment, like you just said. But did you just feel any kind of differences internally between spending a lot of time with these teams during the season?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that, honestly, because it's not a question that I got, but it is one that I noticed in covering the playoffs between these two teams. Of course, Mets go all the way to the NLCS. That was huge. I mean, even just the energy surrounding Citi Field, because it doesn't happen as often too as the Yankees, but leading up to the playoffs, the Yankees were not in that same position where they had that momentum on their side. They had fun. They had the city behind them. When there's grimace on subway cars and grimace in Times Square, like it kind of already was, all right, the Mets are kind of dominating right now in terms of culture. And that was just the background, not even in the clubhouse yet. And then once you get in, it was a fully different vibe. The Mets were completely relaxed and taking it sort of, hey, we're just lucky that we won this game. Let's see what happens. Whereas with the Yankees, you could tell there was so much pressure on their shoulders with Aaron Judge struggling. That was a big storyline. Juan Soto, where is he going to go? It just felt like there was more of this dark cloud covering the Yankees run, even though, of course, they went all the way to the World Series. It didn't have that aspect of the Mets kind of just going on a whim, playing baseball for fun and doing it that way. So, yeah, it's not a question I got, but I'm glad you asked because there's definitely a difference that I saw.
Through your experience, we heard Aaron Judge say that he really hasn't talked to Juan Soto much this offseason. I think he said almost at all. Does that feel weird? I feel like from the fans' perspective on the outside, I'm like, how have you not talked to the guy who is going to be the other best player on your team to try and convince him to come back?
Yeah, my initial reaction was like kind of two things. It's like, are you telling the truth? And I have no reason to believe he's not. Aaron Judge is a fully kind of upfront guy like that, where if he's going to stand in front of us and be honest with the media, he's going to be honest with the media. And that was kind of the sense that I got from Judge before Soto's free agency started when we asked him on the last day after the Yankees were out of the season, out of the World Series. He said, I'm just going to kind of let him take his time. I've been there. I know what it's like. Let him enjoy it. Okay, fine. True from a free agency standpoint. But don't you want this guy on your team?
Yeah,
Like it was
badly.
like kind of, yeah, that was my reaction in terms of, all right, but how much time are you going to give him? Like you have the power right now, so maybe use it, right? Like
Yeah.
if this is, what do you actually, what's the risk here that you're going to beg this guy to come to the Bronx? Sure, he'll remember you that way, right? So I think he might need to be pushing more than he's publicly letting on, or he doesn't want to put it out there as the Yankees are so desperate, just we can't survive without Juan Soto, that type of energy. So it's kind of, it was an interesting comment, no matter how you take it, right? No matter what
Yeah.
anyone says about Juan Soto, we're going to pick into it and go into those tea leaves.
It's also funny because that was juxtaposed with TMZ following Francisco Lindor through LAX when they were rumored that he was going to go to the meeting, but he's like, no, I have a photo shoot with Oakley. And then David Ortiz is openly saying like, yeah, I'm going to try and talk to Juan Soto as much as I possibly can before he makes a decision because I want him to come to Boston bat that badly. But that kind of comes back to this regal Yankees thing that they have. When you were in the media scrum after the World Series ended and Juan Soto says, I'm open to all 30 teams, doesn't put a Yankee hat on. Was there anything noticeable about the other players maybe around or coaches or reporters? Like, was that a shock? Did the air let out of the room or what was the feeling around the team in that exact moment?
Definitely around the team. When we got in, actually, the Yankees let us in about 45 minutes after we were supposed to be in. There's a rule, at least in the CBA with writers, you just go in after 10 minutes. So I was curious, what was that delay about? What are we about to walk into? Guys were crying. I mean, hugging each other in tears. It was still very emotional in there. So at that point that Soto stood in front of reporters and cameras, players were mostly wrapping up. They seemed to know which direction this is going to go. It did take me by surprise how adamant Soto was about not giving the Yankees any lane at all after multiple reporters, including me, gave him many chances to kind of say, but the Yankees have an advantage, right? You loved it here. What about the fans? And of course, now we know all of his answers were very straight about, no, I'm available to everyone. So I think in that way, the tone with the players was already disappointment, of course, over losing. But no matter how the Yankees, that World Series was really embarrassing, right? That was one of those endings that we saw
It's great.
we haven't seen in years, right? So that they're already dealing with that aspect of it, with the drop ball of Judge in that fifth inning. And then on top of that, they're dealing with great. Now we might be on the verge of losing the guy that got us here. So it was definitely a double whammy, no matter how you kind of frame it. And I think they were feeling that in the clubhouse, of that sense of dread of what they're about to face in the in the off season, with facing very little optimism at that point.
The hot talk right now is Juan Soto and the Red Sox. Everybody's linking him to the Red Sox. There's obviously been all those crazy rumors and reports coming from random people on Twitter. Take those all with a grain of salt. Don't listen to him at all, whatever. What do you think about the Red Sox and Juan Soto? Do you think that do you think they could be ahead of the Yankees? Do you think they could be ahead of the Mets? What are you been hearing?
Yeah, I like that their name is in the mix. I think they're one of those franchises, right? David Ortiz, Manny Ramirez. Of course, Soto's going to respect that franchise, so it makes sense for them to be one of these top dogs. Personally, I'm not buying it until we hear something other than, oh, they were in the mix on this player too. Actually, we checked in too. And now today they went, and yesterday went and got Aroldis Chapman's now moving the needle. Good luck with that. So I think it's nice that they are one of those storied franchises that are back in the mix, as they should be. I think this is kind of a low bar. You're expecting the Red Sox to be in. If they get it done, all props to Boston. Right now, it's going to change completely the dynamic of what we thought, how this offseason was going to go, how the AL East will go, how they match up against the Yankees going forward. All of that, of course, is up in the air until they get it done. I think expecting the Red Sox to be in is where they should be. And that was a drop off of where they've been the last 3 seasons. Now they're kind of back into, hey, we're in this too. Remember us? And it's like, yeah, you should have been there the whole time.
Yeah. Mookie Betts, remember him? Yeah.
Right.
Walked
Exactly.
out the door. Let's transport ourselves to a fantasy world right now where pretend Juan Soto to Red Sox does happen. Oh my God, Juan Soto's Red Sox, 15 years, $45 million a year. Wow. How does each New York team, the Yankees and then the Mets, pivot? Where do you think they look next? Where are you hearing anything that the other teams will go for in terms of position, in terms of player, in terms of money, anywhere?
Yeah, starting with the Yankees, because I think it's going to be the toughest pill to swallow for them, especially if Soto goes to the Red Sox and they have to deal with him in the same division. But the question is, how do they still make it a successful offseason, right?
Yeah.
What can they do to kind of still galvanize this fan base? Number one has to be they were really close, right? An offer for Soto they cannot be a huge drop off. But even beyond that, in terms of roster, they have to look at who they can replace in right field. There are some good names still out there. I like Teoscar Hernandez for them, but they can't just stop with replacing the position of Soto, because with Garrett Cole being another year older, Giancarlo Stanton, who was on fire in October, he's also going to be in his age 35 season. Their window is slightly closing, and it doesn't really get talked about enough. Even Judge, he's Judge, so who knows how far he can actually go and play like until he's 45. But they have to capitalize right away. So I think they have to go into adding either a Pete Alonso or Christian Walker at first base, which I think if they miss out on Soto, that splash of going for Pete Alonso, taking him away from the Mets would be
crazy.
Something, right?
Nuts.
For Yankees fans to be like, all right, I think they can live with that type of thing. And of course, go for one of the aces. There's still Corbin Burns left on the market. There's Max Fried, who I like, is kind of going under the radar. One of those two they would have to add of all three to fill those positions. And then as far as the Mets, I don't think this hurts them as much, right? They were not planning on a Soto the way the Yankees already had him, and he took them to the World Series. Whereas the Mets got far without Soto, and with the pieces that they had built by David Stearns and kind of working on the margins in that way. Still, the first priority for the Mets, of course, has to be Pete Alonso. I think it's interesting that Pete is getting overshadowed by Soto. I mean, rightfully so. But if he was any other free agency, Pete Alonso would be the star of this offseason. He would be the superstar taking up all the headlines. So he's right there. He's sitting there for the Mets. Obviously, Pete wants to be back. We know that. The Mets are now, of course, trying to come to a deal that makes sense for both sides. They know him the best. What's his future? And really, I think it's interesting what they're going to do with or without Pete. At third base and at second base. Do you run Jeff McNeil back out there? Do you stick with Mark Vientos at third? He was serviceable, but he's not a superstar. So they have some room there to play around depending on how the offseason, of course, goes first with Soto and then Pete and take it from there.
Do you think the reason that we haven't really heard much about almost any other free agent hitter, and especially Pete Alonso, is just simply everybody's waiting for Soto for
Definitely,
the domino
yeah.
flow? Yeah.
Yeah, I think the market entirely was resting on Soto's shoulders before the World Series was even over. It was no team can really move except for the Dodgers of Blake Snell. And that I thought was interesting after too, that the Yankees had a Zoom with him that day, but they couldn't really pull the trigger. They needed to wait on Soto. So if the market starts moving before Soto, we're going to see teams like the Yankees, maybe the Mets, kind of miss out on some players just because they're really tied up in how much is Soto going to cost and how much that will dictate the rest of their moves this offseason.
Do you think that's a reason the Mets may have jumped on Frankie Montas seemingly a little bit earlier than some of the market moving, just to get a guy in there who's not going to affect their payroll that much with Soto on the table still?
Yeah, I think that was a very classic David Stearns move to me. Even in the context of Soto being Soto this offseason, I think David Stearns is able to, exactly like he did all year, work on the margins and not get too distracted by that big fish. And seeing an offer that makes sense, like very much like Sean Manaea and Luis Severino last year, run it back, right? Why not? It worked out. And it's not that much of a risk when you're operating in Steve Cohen's neighborhood. So either way, I think that's a deal. If it happened now, if it happened in January, that's a smart move for them. They have to shore up pitchers either way. So I like the timing of it, but of course, I don't think it really dictates whether or not they're actually going after Soto or staying put there.
Do you think it has any effect on them for the rest of the starting pitching market? Like it to us, it at least feels like the Burns, the Freeds, those guys, you kind of can't go after them either without Juan Soto knowing where he's going. So you think the Mets will still be aggressive towards the top of the pitching market?
Yeah, I think they'll definitely still be aggressive, but I think, like you said, it does depend now on what the Soto situation will be and how much they're going to allocate to him this season. And especially with the Blake Snell contract, too, and the Dodgers deferring contracts, I'm waiting for another team like the Mets, whoever, to do it, to kind of follow up there. So, yeah, I think especially with the top dogs, the Corbin Birds, the Max Frieds on the market, you do have to wait a little. I wasn't as surprised, I think, as other people with that Frankie Montas deal. That's just what starters are earning now. I think
Yep.
that's a good bar sort of to go off of now. So I think they still should absolutely be in. And I like that Mets fans are getting into that habit of it's not my money,
Yep.
whatever. Like we'll go past the luxury task. Look at Steve Cohen. We're happy with what he's doing, and now there's David Stearns making the decision. So I think that should be the new normal if it isn't already for the Mets.
Yeah, I think it's normal for some fans. I think Mets fans are still kind of split, thinking that we should sign every single ace and every single player. Our YouTube video about Frankie Montas had about 250 angry comments that we were dumpster diving and there's no reason to, and that Steve Cohen was the same as the Wilpons. You were on the Mets beat from 2019 through 2022, so you happened to be there in the middle of everything when the ownership changed hands. What was it like watching that shift from as close to the inside as someone on the outside could get?
It was awesome. I mean, I think looking back, whenever my career is done, that's going to be one of the moments that I'm most proud that I got to experience and be a part of and get some reporting in there that was interesting. I remember reporting on Bill de Blasio and how he was trying to get all these like laws in place just to make it harder for Steve Cohen to buy
Yep.
the Mets. And it's funny how petty it got at one point. But overall, I think just being a part of that ownership change and getting to know, of course, the new ownership and getting to write a feature on Alex Cohen and just getting to know her too as a person has been awesome. I think that's really rare, not just for sports, but especially in baseball, that owners are so just willing to be right in your face and normal about it and just chat and it's not a big deal. And that kind of in culture and environment that I've got to see up close is something that I don't take for granted. And I think that's really hard even to mimic anywhere else in sports with it having that authentic feel. So that part to me is, I think, of course, the biggest difference going from the Will
Yeah.
Ponds to the up in your face Cohen, who like Grandpa Cohen was getting champagne poured on him in the champagne celebrations after they advanced to the CS. Like things like that are just, you have to take a step back and be like, wow. So that's been really cool to see up close.
Yeah, no, that fans I think can also feel the difference too, not just on the field but off the field of how this organization everything looks, and it's very refreshing as lifelong Mets fans. Before we let you go, you mentioned at the beginning the golden at bat that is being floated around right now. Is that real? Because it's
Doesn't feel
insane,
real.
and it seems like it's a terrible idea, but there's a lot of reporting going on it right now.
It's definitely a terrible idea. I'm of the camp of just the biggest no thanks, hard pass.
No.
get it out of here. I do love that there are even ideas being floated. I think we're overdue for just kind of throwing things to the wall and seeing how people react to it. This isn't a rule that's going in place tomorrow. It's not coming into the major leagues next season. It is simply just a talking point. So I think in that realm, that's probably the only positive that came out of the golden at bat rule. But no, I'm just really not a fan of it. I was surprised in the Jason Stark article in The Athletic that players were kind of lukewarm, maybe even okay with it. Of course, it was presented in a way that's, let's start it in the All-Star game. Okay, sure. The All-Star game doesn't even count anymore anyway. It doesn't even decide home field advantage like it used to. So fine, there, why not do whatever you want in the All-Star game? But when it comes to the real regular season playoffs, it cannot be a thing. I think it completely takes away the concept that I think fans love is, right, getting to know your team, including that 26th man on the roster who's just up at the plate and the hardest. What is he going to do? Is he going to surprise you? It's just going to take away that entire element. It seems like a small thing, but I think what everyone points to with Shohei Ohtani and Mike Trout going up against each other in the World Baseball Classic, what made that so special was it was organic. It was not just formulated because of this at bat rule. It happened that way and it felt like it was scripted, but it wasn't scripted. So I think trying to chase something down in like the golden at bat just to make it happen because it would be exciting to compare it to football, to NBA. They're different sports. We're talking about baseball. So yeah, I sound like a baseball purist. I'm not all the way, but on this note, I definitely am.
I mean, thinking about why a player would like it, I remember that at NLDS at bat between the Phillies and the Braves. I forgot who came up to the plate, but it was literally the 26th player on the Braves roster. Mark, do you remember who it was? It was the last at bat of the game. It was a nonsense player. It wasn't Chadwick Tromp. It was backup infielder. I don't remember, but I can see Ronald Acuna Jr. being like, "Why is he up right now? Please let me get. Please let me hit. This is ridiculous." But Deesha, thank you so much for coming on with us. I got one question before we let you go. I know you're a Penn State girl. I went to Ohio State, so rather than watch the game this weekend, I'm going to just lay in traffic or swim in the East River or something. But you excited to watch Penn State play in the Big Ten Championship in the college football playoff?
I am very excited. I'll be packing for the winter meetings then in my stress, but I'm hyped. I mean, I've been following them this closely for the first time since I graduated, which I'm not even going to reveal at this point, but it has been an exciting season and I can't wait. It's good to know though. We got the rivalry going. Let's go.
Yeah, right. All right. Deesha, thank you again. Have fun with the winter meetings. Plug your social medias, let people know where to follow you and where to find your work.
Yeah, of course. Follow me on Deesha Thosar at Twitter. And if you're on Blue Sky, it's Deesh Tho.
Awesome. Thank you, Deesha. Appreciate it. And good luck.
Of course. Thanks for having me on, guys.